The Washington Monument is arguably one of the most famous monuments in the world. However, most DC natives haven't been there. A lot of DC natives view it as just a tourist destination, but it's so much more. The Washington Monument symbolizes George Washington's greatness and importance to the founding of this country through its history, presence, and continued impact on the city.
The Washington Monument was originally built as a statue to honor George Washington as a Revolutionary War leader. Washington was recognized for his humble character in stepping down after 2 years instead of becoming a monarch. After he was president, they decided to build a full monument instead of just a statue. The Washington National Monument Society was formed in 1832, 33 years after George Washington's death, as a private company. On the inside of the monument on the lower level, a quote of Henry Lee's eulogy for George Washington is embroidered on the wall. The eulogy reflects on the strong and powerful character of Washington and makes all visitors to the monument reflect on Washington's legacy before going to the top of the monument. Construction started on July 4th in 1948, and the cornerstone weighed 25,000 pounds. The monument is made entirely out of Maryland marble. It is designed by Robert Mills to have an obelisk shape, which he believed was timeless and reminiscent of ancient civilizations that the U.S. was built off of. The Know Nothing Party was elected to the D.C. legislature and took money from the society in the election of 1855. After this, construction was stagnant for 2 decades, until the end of the war in 1876, when Congress assumed construction of the monument led by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The quarry that had been used for 20 years before was out of marble, so they found a new source near Baltimore, which led to the color change that you see today about midway through. Construction was completed in 1875, 1 day before Washington's birthday. The top of the pyramid is made out of aluminum, which at the time was more valuable than gold. Slavery was abolished in Washington, D.C. in 1862, and the first part of construction ended in 1854. So slaves were used in the first part of construction, working in the quarries, moving stones, and in the actual building process. So even though in American society this building represents freedom and democracy, slaves were fundamental to the construction of it, and they don't get enough credit today.
The Washington Monument is a 555-foot tall, 55-foot wide stone obelisk. For many surrounding acres, the view is completely unobstructed. The monument is an anchor of the National Mall and the entire city. It's faced by Lincoln, the Capitol, and intentionally pointed to by one end of the Vietnam Monument. Although the Washington Monument is not conventionally sacred, as it doesn't memorialize loss or evoke remembrance, the scale and singularity of its physical structure certainly evokes an eerie, contemplative feeling. To be in its shadow reminds visitors of how small we are, whether literally or symbolically, and the surrounding stone benches, plazas, and fields encourage us to bask in its grandeur. This is the central pathos of the monument. The radiating paths extend this power into the urban landscape, and its height brings our world closer to the heavens or the unknown or the future. While physically striking, the shape of an obelisk is also symbolically intentional. Obelisks were pioneered and reproduced by the great ancient Egyptians, so structures like these in the modern day reference the strength and timelessness of ancient values. For the burgeoning American identity of the mid-1800s when the monument was built, a stone obelisk like this was a perfect way to tie our young nation to ideals of successful civilizations of the past. We claim this inheritance by centering the obelisk as the central focal point of our capital city, and we own it with the 50 waving American flags at the monument's base. One of the few direct symbols of the monument was inside at the very top, where the colorful stone floor maps out a giant compass. Not only does this reference the monument as the origin of Washington, D.C., but it reminds us of George Washington's humble beginnings as a property surveyor. But what else might this monument symbolize? Most people we interviewed didn't know, or at least couldn't articulate it. It seems like the monument to most people is merely a symbol of itself, or of some vague idea of patriotism or gloriously vague American history. The Washington Monument is so iconic that it doesn't need to evoke or educate to justify a trip, and for many locals, the unobstructed green space is just as exciting.
The Washington Monument is located centrally in the National Mall. It was planned to be built on direct access with the White House to the north and the U.S. Capitol to the west, but that location would not have supported the weight over time, so it was moved slightly northeast. Regardless of the location, it was built not to fit into the surrounding landscape, but to rise above it. It is a common myth that no buildings in D.C. are allowed to be taller than the monument. It is the tallest building in D.C., but not the rule. The rule is the Height Act, originally made in 1899, and although it's been changed many times, it's always been the limiting legislation on skyscrapers in our nation's capital. Current regulation is that the height of a building cannot exceed the width of the street it's facing, so the tallest buildings are always along the widest boulevards. This gives DC a really unique feel for a city, with a low skyline and sunny streets. However, this limit on building up limits potential building space, which means the city cannot grow indefinitely to house a growing population. This limited housing drives up the cost of housing, which contributes to poverty and gentrification. The Washington Monument was created before the Height Act, so it towers over the rest of the city. It is unique for a size disparity like this to stand the test of time. In most other cities, new technology and city growth has resulted in new buildings rising above the once towering historic artifacts. This long-lasting disparity forces interpretation. People in DC in comparatively puny buildings look to the monument, and Washington's importance is clear.
The monument is effective in establishing a sense of pride and patriotism. It establishes this pathos in the form of the magnitude of the monument. According to people visiting the monument who we interviewed, the striking shape and color left them speechless. Strategic planning of the monument is an example of logos. As a growing center that represented both the North and South, Washington, D.C., and the mall specifically, which is near the Capitol, was an ideal location for the monument. The monument demonstrates ethos with engraved stones that were commissioned by states, corporations, and prominent figures, along with donations in order to have their stones added to the monument. People became aware of the importance of the monument because of this, and every one of the 50 states had a stone that commemorated them.
The Washington Monument situates the United States as a continuation of eternal values of Western civilization thanks to our humble founding father. Despite its deep and troubled history, the monument represents the bright present and future of the United States.
Where are you from?
I'm from Reading, Pennsylvania.
South Carolina.
South Carolina.
I'm from Wisconsin.
I'm from Missouri. National country is China.
Columbia, South Carolina.
Why'd you guys come here to this monument?
It's like the national monument, like everybody knows it. So you're in Washington, D.C., so why not look at the
Why not?
monument?
Just have a spring travel with my friend and enjoy the historical articles and learn some knowledge such as nature or the history for the U.S.
I think it's fantastic, and I think it's a really good opportunity. We've never been to show our kids history about the United States.
How does this space make you feel? Like, what emotions does it evoke?
Patriotism. That's the word.
I feel very proud, and I'm excited about the future, just what our country stands for. When you get the insignificant we are and how big the purpose is.
So how does it make you feel knowing that this monument was built by slaves?
It's kind of depressing.
So how long have you been working in the park service and for the Washington Monument?
So now about 8 years.
Do you feel proud to work at the Washington Monument?
I do.
Yeah.
Being on the National Mall, I get to introduce those things that represent us to people from all around the world.
How does this monument specifically, what do you think is unique about it, important?
Unique about this, is the world's tallest freestanding stone structure. But this honors the greatest figure, some would argue, in American history, George Washington, but not for the power he had or the power he wielded, but for the humility of the power he gave up. We honor Washington not for being president, but for going back to civilian life after the Revolution, when he could have taken over and become King George I of America, and instead he lets our republic get established.